Hey guys, this is Locke. This video is going to be a little bit of a follow-up video I did earlier today talking about Erich. So what happened was I had released that video, and then a couple hours later, I think Stu Gaming also released a video, and his video was giving quite a different opinion of Erich than mine did. And a lot of people kind of talked to me about it, and they said, "Hey, are you sure? This is what Stu is saying, and this is what he's showing." And to be honest, I'm glad that he did that, because I think it, it's okay for different content creators to have different opinions, and it also makes me rethink what I'm saying, because again, a lot of what everyone says is based on their own opinions. If someone's saying something totally different to what I'm saying, it makes me rethink myself, and see, maybe I should correct myself, or maybe I should rephrase something I'm saying. So anyway, it made me rethink what I was saying about Erich. And first of all, I just want to give a hand to Stu Gaming. I think he does, like, pretty fantastic videos. Definitely check him out. He does a lot of content where he beats a lot of dungeons with just rare units. So it's quite refreshing to see his content. I have taken a look at a few of his videos, and I think they're pretty cool. So when it comes to Erich, he's a bit worse than I thought, but I don't think he's bad, to be honest. I think there's still places where I would use him even over Usha. But first of all, let me talk about why I thought he was better than he is. It actually comes down to his passive. I had misread it or misunderstood it, but if you read the second half of it, it says whenever the hero performs a successful wild check, the hero's skills additionally deal plus 70% attack. So I assumed this meant that, usually a wild check increases the damage of your skill from 100% to 120. I thought this meant that it would increase the damage from 100% to 190%, which is pretty huge. So what I thought that meant was that this skill, the base attack of this skill is a 750% of attack. I thought that would go up to 1,350, the way I understood it, but unfortunately, that's not what's really happening. So the wild is still increasing the attack by 120%, and then additionally, you add 70%. So it's plus 70%, it's not a multiplier. So what happens in this case is that 750% damage works out to 970 percent. So that's significantly lower than the 1,350 that I was thinking this would do. So I feel like a lot of the reason I thought he was so good comes down to that. I mean, and obviously the damage multiplier on this skill would also be impacted. I thought it was higher than it would have been, but unfortunately not. However, I still think that he's pretty decent, and I will kind of go into that. First of all, I want to talk about some of the stuff that I agree with Stu. So Stu did some kind of testing, and in his testing, he used two rally characters. So he used. I'm just gonna pick a different. He did something. Sort of. It's not rally. It's wild. He used two wild characters, and he looked at the damage output, and then he did the same thing with ice characters, the frost characters. I mean, so he did this, and a different frost character. Um, I'm just gonna quickly find one. I think this is a frost character. Yep. So he did something like this, and he found that Usha did significantly more damage than Erich, which is weird because Erich is a legendary and Usha is a rare. So why is that happening? And in my tests, I came to the same conclusion. In a setting like this, where I have two frost characters versus two wild characters, Usha and company outperforms Erich and company. However, um, well, take a look at the first five units that I'm using, right? These are the five characters that I usually use in most content, and I mean, just to kind of, okay. So of these five characters, only Oster is my real DPS only kind of character, and then I have a dedicated tank, and then I have three characters that, well, first of all, they're labeled as support. They are offensive characters, but they also do a bunch of other things, like they debuff and they also heal. Um, so because I have these kind of multi-role characters, I don't really even need to bring a dedicated healer. I have one, and some stages I have to take one of these guys out and put in a dedicated healer, or sometimes I would have to bring Thea because I need even more supportive options and take one of these out. But for the most part, this this is fine. But the thing I want you to pay attention to is I only have enough room to bring one dedicated offensive character that doesn't do anything else. Like Oster doesn't do anything else besides damage. That's all he does. And early on, like I actually watched Stu's a video about Usha earlier, and when I had Oster and I also had Usha, I did some testings with them, and they worked really well. The reason they work really well is because Oster can almost permanently put frost on whoever he's attacking. That's just how his skill works. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but that's kind of what he does. So Usha would always have frost on whoever she's, the enemy would always have a frost debuff, and she would do really well. But I opted not to use Usha, and the reason for that is because of these five characters. If I was going to put Usha in, I actually need to take two characters out. Of these three, I have to take out two of them because the healing and the debuffs that I'm doing between these three, they can manage. But if I have to take one of these three out and only have two kind of semi healers, they probably can't keep up, especially on dungeons where I'm fighting different bosses. So most likely, what I would have to do if I want to put Usha in is take two of these out, put in a dedicated healer and Usha. So that way, that would work. But to me, I think that's a lot less effective than having three, supportive offensive characters and just one main DPS. Now, this is going to be dependent on your roster. But if you have a roster similar to mine, in that you have characters that are, like supportive characters that you're using, that they don't only do attacks, but they do other things, and you only have one spot for a dedicated DPS slot, in that case, Erich, I think, has a leg up over Usha, according to my tests anyway. So what I did was I basically did this. I tested Usha and I tested Erich, and I put this is the gear that I used on both of them. And if you notice, I didn't even put a rune because I wanted it to be as close as possible that I can mimic on both of the characters. I also tried to make the crit rate as high as possible because if I have a 50% crit rate, maybe sometimes I crit, sometimes I don't. But in one particular run I do, maybe I just so happen to always roll the die and crit more often, and on the other one I happen to roll the die negatively and crit less often. So I wanted to remove the chance as much as possible, so that's why I gave a very high crit rate to both of them, and that's what I did. And from this test, I found that if I only have one unit, only Erich versus only Usha, Erich outperformed in terms of damage. And also, I want you to notice that Usha, her skills are maxed out. And that might even be okay because I think for the typical person, you have rare scrolls and you're able to more easily max out her skills, whereas with Erich, you probably can't. And I also have level 1 skills on him. I didn't put any scrolls on him. Um, but already, I mean, she already has a damage boost because of this, right? Because her ult is cooling down a lot faster, her battle skills are cooling down faster, and both of them, well, especially this skill, is getting an increase in damage. Um, at least 10% increase in damage. Whereas for Erich, it's just base skills. Like his cooldown is longer for both of his skills, and he's also not benefiting from the additional damage from the skill ups. So, but still, even with that limitation, he still outperformed and did more damage than Usha. And I mean, you're probably not going to just take my word for it. So at the end of this video, I will post two small short clips where it shows the test I did. This is the settings that I used for this dummy when I did the test. I put it to level 70, and the reason I put it to level 70 is because I wanted this thing to have more defense. If I'm doing level 1, I don't know, the calculation is different, right? Because it's like attack minus defense times multiplier, and Erich has a higher base attack. He has 820 attack compared to her, who has 685 attack. So I think it's a bit. I don't know. I mean, I think the calculation would work out differently if I use a level 1 monster, but I think it's unreasonable because, I mean, the enemies that I'm fighting would have more defense. So I think it's more. I think it's more appropriate to use a monster level that's higher. Um, yeah, and I also changed the duration to 5 minutes because I think especially because of the skills, the timer on the skills. I think I had to go a long enough time to kind of make sure that it's somewhat fair. That's what I was trying to do. So anyway, so that's what I found. And maybe if you can do the test for yourself as well, because I mean everyone should have Erich, and Yusha is a rare, so I'm sure a lot of people have access to her. So in that situation, like if you are only able to bring only one dedicated DPS unit, maybe in that situation, Erich is the better choice. But again, it depends on your roster, because maybe you are the type of person that it just so happened that you have two dedicated healers and you don't have anyone like this, that you don't have somebody that can support, that can do damage and heal. So in that case, your roster would probably look like two healers, two dedicated healers, one tank, and two full out offensive characters. In that case, Usha plus another Frost applier would outperform. So in that case, you should probably bring Usha and somebody else instead of Erich and another wild character, because Usha and company outperforms in terms of pure damage. But there is one more layer to this as well that I haven't mentioned yet. So when I look at Erich and also any other wild character, their mechanic works such that inherently, whenever they cast a skill, they have a 30% chance, or sometimes more, but usually 30% chance to increase their damage by 20%. And everything else is based off of that 30% chance. But that's usually there. I mean, you can use some skills or whatever to increase that chance, but you can't change that with gear. Regardless of whatever gear you're putting on, that 30% chance is the 30% chance. So, how we will typically gear the wild guys, you will put a lot of attack, you'll put a lot of crit damage, and a lot of crit rate. Now, when it comes to frost units, however, it's different, because the frost mechanic works such that you have to apply frost on an enemy, then all the frost units will benefit from that because they can do additional damage or something and something, right? But the problem is that you have to apply it first. And as you get to higher levels, you will notice that the bosses have very high resistance, so you have to bring very high accuracy. So if we go back to what I just said with only one unit that you're bringing, so if you're putting Usha in this role instead of my Oster, Usha will unfortunately have to have a lot of accuracy. Even my Oster, I took out all the other gears he's using because I have it on Erich right now. This is actually Usha's gear, but well, with some modification because I had to bring the crit rate as high as possible. But anyway, but even the rune that I'm using an accuracy rune on him because I have to. If I don't have enough accuracy on him, he doesn't apply frost on the boss, and if he doesn't apply frost on the boss, his passive is useless because he actually does quite a lot of extra damage, when frost is applied to the boss, and he permanently is able to keep it up, but he has to land it. He has to be able to apply, the frost debuff, and if he doesn't, he's actually missing out on so much damage. And that's kind of similar with Usha as well. And to be honest, most other frost units, like they need to apply frost and then they benefit from it. Everyone on the team benefits from it. So if you're only bringing Usha, you have to sacrifice some attack to put into the accuracy stat. If you're bringing two units, then again, maybe you don't have to sacrifice Usha's attack, but you have to sacrifice the other frost unit's attack. And when I looked at the roster of frost units, it's not just frost units, to be honest. It's everyone, and like any wild. Actually, let me just go there. So on this roster, support and defense units, they can do multiple things, especially support units. They can have high attack and they can still debuff, or they can still heal, or they can still provide buffs or shields or something. But any of the others, like these six, all of these are either offensive units or they provide some kind of supporting role, but only to their tag. Like for example, there might be a rally unit that that could be a supporting rally unit, but the support is usually to other rally units. So the rally unit might not be supporting, a non-rally unit. Or something like that. I mean, there might be some few exceptions, but on the most part, that's what it is. So if I look at frost units, uh, most of these are going to be damage dealers, and so because they're damage dealers, you have to, if you don't want to sacrifice Usha's damage, you are going to have to sacrifice somebody else's damage a little bit to put accuracy, because if you don't have accuracy, Frost is useless. I mean, bosses can have up to, like, 200 resistance at some points, so you have to bring 220 accuracy on your units if you want to land the debuff on them. So to get to 220 accuracy, you have to give up some substats, or you have to get a really lucky roll to have attack, crit rate, crit damage, and accuracy as the four substats on a piece. Or you might have to do what I'm doing with Oster, where your rune might have to be an accuracy rune, or maybe your chess piece has to be an accuracy chess piece, something like that. But the short, the long story short, you have to make room to bring accuracy in your team composition. This is not the case with wild characters, though. So even when you're comparing two units to two units, wild units might end up actually having an overall higher damage output, simply because you don't need to bring any accuracy for them. But with frost units, you have to make room for accuracy. At least you have to have one unit that can consistently apply the frost debuff, and that one unit has to have a lot of accuracy. You're probably not going to bring a team which has like five frost units or five wild units, to be honest, because you will probably need to bring one tank. You'll probably need to bring at least one healer, dedicated or not. And so the most you could probably bring is either three frost units or three wild units when we're comparing the two. And yeah, so I mean, it's not really apples to apples. Like when you're comparing Usha to Erich, it's not a direct comparison, because it's a bit more nuanced than that. You have to kind of look at it in a whole, right? Like the whole picture. So I still think Erich is good. I still think he has a spot on the team, and I think he would work in different compositions. And just one last final thought that I want to give is that, regardless of what the numbers say, I think one of the more important things to enjoy the game is also just the enjoyment. Use characters that you find are, that you're more excited to play. If you resonate with the character, I think you should go with that character more, because at the end of the day, Usha or Erich, they're both damage dealers, and you can probably find a way to make both of them work for you. I don't think Erich is as bad as what I've been told. Um, I think he has a spot, but I think comparing him in the way that he was compared with Usha, I don't think you should discount him just like that. I think you have to think about the team in general, and also in the future. Where are you making sacrifices? You have to make sacrifices of accuracy, or you have to take out more supporting characters to fit two characters in your team instead of one. You know, it's a game. You have to manage your resources and manage your heroes, and figure it out, and figure out something that works for you. What works for me is not going to work for you. Is not going to work for someone else. I mean, everyone has a totally different roster. Everyone even has different stats on your equipment. Maybe somebody has stats with high accuracy in their gears. It just so happened, and also very high attack and crit stats. So in that case, I mean, it's not even such a big deal to include accuracy in your gear, because it just so happened that you got really lucky rolls. So you know, there. I think, anyway. My long story short, I think there is a spot for Erich to run on different teams. So don't just completely discount him. I mean, if you really like the guy, I think there you can include him, and yeah, that's it. So right now I'm gonna show you the videos that I made where I'm comparing the two units, and at the end of this video, if you want to fast forward to the end, the last 20 seconds, I will just do a still of the total damage output between the two units. So you can also just, if you want to skip to the end, you can do that and see what the damage output for the two of them were. That's it for my video. I hope you enjoyed listening to my thoughts. And if you have more questions or comments about this, leave them down below, and I will do my best to get back to you. Take care, guys.